All right. I have no idea what happened. I thought I did everything right. I thought I hit all the right buttons, and I started the stream on this end, and YouTube never got it. So I completely reset the settings as I set them through the setting buttons, and then set them again, and we're up, according to YouTube. So once again, what are we going to do here? We're going to go over the Attorney General letter that was sent to Congress, House and Senate today, just a little while ago. We're going to read the pages. I'm going to make the odd comment as we go along. I try not to take too much time bogging you down with my details, but we'll say what we can say. And then I'm going to read a portion of Hate Incorporated. This is by an author. He writes for the... I'm so sorry. Anyway, it just stripped my head. Oh, Rolling Stone. Thank you, Rolling Stone. I kept wanting to say Mother Jones, and I knew that was wrong. I doubt I'd ever read anything from a guy from Mother Jones. Anyway, it's a book called Hate Incorporated, and it describes the modern journalism industry and what it's been doing to the country. There are a number of chapters already out. It's a serialized web production. But this chapter is very, very important to what's going on today. So I think it's worth reading. So we'll follow up with that. So without further ado, let's get to the AG letter. Now this of course was dated today, and it's sent to the committee chairs and ranking members of the judiciary committees in both the House and Senate. So we've got the Honorable Lindsey Graham, Chairman, Committee on the Judiciary, the Honorable Dianne Feinstein, Committee on the Judiciary, the Honorable Gerald Nadler, Chairman, Committee on the Judiciary, and the Honorable Doug Collins, Ranking Member, Committee on the Judiciary. And I forgot to mention, Lindsey is the Chairman of the Senate Committee, and Feinstein is, of course, the Ranking Member on the Senate Committee. My mistake. You may remember Doug Collins as being the provider of that manna from heaven, otherwise known as the transcripts from the Lisa Page, Peter Strzok, and Bruce Orr interviews from last year in front of the House Judiciary Committee. Thank you, Congressman Collins. So, we're going to get into this. It's about 4 pages long. Not very many footnotes here, as I can tell. And then we'll get to Hate Incorporated. So, to start. Dear Chairman Graham, Chairman Nadler, Ranking Member Feinstein, and Ranking Member Collins. And this is again from Attorney General William Barr. As a supplement to the notification provided on Friday, March 22, 2019, I am writing today to advise you of the principal conclusions reached by Special Counsel Robert S. Mueller III and to inform you about the status of my initial review of the report he has prepared. On Friday, the special counsel submitted to me a quote, confidential report explaining the prosecution or declination decisions, unquote, he has reached as required by 28 CFR 608C. This report is entitled, quote, Report on the Investigation into Russian Interference in the 2016 Presidential Election, close quote. Although my review is ongoing, I believe that it is in the public interest to describe the report and to summarize the principal conclusions reached by the special counsel and the results of his investigation. The report explains that the special counsel and his staff thoroughly investigated allegations that members of the presidential campaign of Donald J. Trump and others associated with it conspired with the Russian government in its efforts to interfere in the 2016 U.S. presidential election or sought to obstruct the related federal investigations. In the report, the special counsel noted that, in completing his investigation, he employed 19 lawyers who were assisted by a team of approximately 40 FBI agents, intelligence analysts, forensic accountants, and other professional staff. The special counsel issued more than 2,800 subpoenas, executed nearly 500 search warrants, obtained more than 230 orders for communication records, issued almost 50 orders authorizing the use of pen registers, made 13 requests to foreign governments for evidence, and interviewed approximately 500 witnesses. Now, I believe a pen register is like a keylogger, but let's look it up to be sure. Pen registers and trap and trace devices. A pen register or dial number recorder is an electronic device that records all numbers called from a particular telephone line. Ah, okay. Not quite what I thought. But anyway, that was trapping phone calls, or at least phone numbers, so they could reference those. I understand. And interviewed approximately 500 witnesses. Page 2. The special counsel obtained a number of indictments and convictions of individuals and entities in connection with his investigation, all of which have been publicly disclosed. During the course of his investigation, the special counsel also referred several matters to other offices for further action. The report does not recommend any further indictments, nor did the special counsel obtain any sealed indictments that have yet to be made public. Below, I summarize the principal conclusions set out in the special counsel's report. Russian interference in the 2016 U.S. presidential election. The special counsel's report is divided into two parts. The first describes the results of the special counsel's investigation into Russia's interference in the 2016 U.S. presidential election. The report outlines the Russian effort to influence the election and documents crimes committed by persons associated with the Russian government in connection with those efforts. The report further explains that a primary consideration for the special counsel's investigation was whether any Americans, including individuals associated with the Trump campaign, joined the Russian conspiracies to influence the election, which would be a federal crime. And you remember there was one American citizen out of California who was indicted and I believe pled guilty. Don't you have to check me on that, but I know he was indicted on I believe money laundering and identity theft charges. He was helping the Russian agents in the U.S. who were gaining Facebook and Twitter IDs through his methods in order to create more and more accounts. And I know they rung him up on that. So that goes to show you just how far ranging the Russia investigation was. The special counsel's The special counsel's investigation did not find that the Trump campaign or anyone associated with it conspired or coordinated with Russia in its efforts to influence the 2016 U.S. presidential election. As the report states, quote, the investigation did not establish that members of the Trump campaign conspired or coordinated with the Russian government in its election interference activities. Suck on that, Schiff. The special counsel's investigation determined that there were two main Russian efforts to influence the 2016 election. The first involved attempts by a Russian organization, the Internet Research Agency, IRA, to conduct disinformation and social media operations in the United States designed to sow social discord, eventually with the aim of interfering with the election. As noted above, the special counsel did not find that any U.S. person or Trump campaign official or associate conspired or knowingly coordinated with the IRA in its efforts, although the special counsel brought criminal charges against a number of Russian nationals and entities in connection with these activities. The second element involved the Russian government's efforts to conduct computer hacking operations designed to gather and disseminate information to influence the election. The special counsel found that Russian government actors successfully hacked into computers and obtained emails from persons affiliated with the Clinton campaign and Democratic Party organizations and publicly disseminated those materials through various intermediaries, including WikiLeaks. I can't wait to see the evidence on that. I've seen some fairly definitive work that shows those emails were stolen from the server, not hacked remotely. So I'm looking for that. If I'm not calling Mueller a liar, but from what I've read, he's wrong. So I'm looking forward to seeing the breakdown of that. The second element involved... I'm sorry, did I already read that? Yeah. Based on these activities, the special counsel brought criminal charges against a number of Russian military officers for conspiring to hack into computers in the United States for purposes of influencing the election. But as noted above, the special counsel did not find that the Trump campaign or anyone associated with it conspired or coordinated with the Russian government in these efforts, despite multiple offers from Russian-affiliated individuals to assist the Trump campaign. Now, there's something a little new. There's always been this talk about the Trump campaign contacting Russians, having contact with Russians. Oh, there were 137 incidents of contact or something silly like that. Yeah, and how many of them were illegal? Well, it turns out none. In fact, some of those contacts were initiated by the Russians, as it says here, to the Trump campaign, and the Trump campaign rebuffed them whenever they said, hey, we want to coordinate with you. We want to, right there, conspire with you to throw the election. The Trump campaign rebuffed them at every opportunity. So, again, where's your evidence, Schiff? I can't wait to see it. He'll never show it because he doesn't have it. Now, I missed this footnote. It was up here from the sentence that goes, as the report states, the investigation did not establish that members of the Trump campaign conspired or coordinated with the Russian government in its election interference activities. That footnote reads, in assessing potential conspiracy charges, the special counsel also considered whether members of the Trump campaign, quote-unquote, coordinated with Russian election interference activities. The special counsel defined coordination as, quote, an agreement, tacit or express, between the Trump campaign and the Russian government on election interference. Pretty definitive. Page 3. Obstruction of justice. The report's second part addresses a number of actions by the President, most of which have been the subject of public reporting, that the special counsel investigated as potentially raising obstruction of justice concerns. After making a, quote, thorough factual investigation, end quote, into these matters, the special counsel considered whether to evaluate the conduct under department standards governing prosecution and declination decisions, but ultimately determined not to make a traditional prosecutorial judgment. The special counsel therefore did not draw a conclusion, one way or the other, as to whether the examined conduct constituted obstruction. Instead, for each of the relevant actions investigated, the report sets out evidence on both sides of the question and leaves unresolved what the special counsel views as, quote, difficult issues, unquote, of law and fact concerning whether the President's actions and intent could be viewed as obstruction. The special counsel states that, quote, while this report does not conclude the President committed a crime, it also does not exonerate him, end quote. Now, is that Mueller pussying out? I don't think so, because if you look at how aggressively he worked this investigation, I mean, the how many thousands of documents they reviewed, the PIN registers, things like that, or pen registers, excuse me. It's obvious he didn't leave any stones unturned. So I don't think, and look at all the things that he transferred to the Southern District in New York, or to the I believe Eastern District of Virginia federal courts. He was not afraid of pushing things out there. So I think in this instance, he basically said, this is a matter of delicacy, and I don't think it's up to me to come down on the side of the law on this one. I'm going to because I would be judge and jury when I call this. So I'm going to leave that up to the law enforcement professionals, the ones who are charged with enforcing the law. Because remember, Mueller was a investigation. That's technically not the same as a prosecution. He did prosecute crimes, but through the courts. In this instance, he would have prosecuted it internally. And I think he saw that as being at least a huge landmine, if not absolutely beyond his purview. To continue. The special counsel's decision to describe the facts of his obstruction investigation without reaching any legal conclusions leaves it to the Attorney General to determine whether the conduct described in the report constitutes a crime. Over the course of the investigation, the special counsel's office engaged in discussions with certain department officials regarding many of the legal and factual matters at issue in the special counsel's obstruction investigation. After reviewing the special counsel's final report on these issues, consulting with department officials, including the Office of Legal Counsel, and applying the principles of federal prosecution that guide our charging decisions, Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein and I have concluded that the evidence developed during the special counsel's investigation is not sufficient to establish that the President committed an obstruction of justice offense. Our determination was made without regard to and is not based on the constitutional considerations that surround the indictment and criminal prosecution of a sitting president. There's two things there. Let's go to the first. The AG did not make this determination on his own. He did not sit there and say, well, it's my call, and he didn't do it. He didn't obstruct. He took it throughout the department. And I'm sure the Democrats are going to go nuts about trying to obtain all of his records of his meetings. And you know what? I don't care. But I'm sure Barr will say, aside from anything that's classified or confidential, sources and methods, you'll have it all. You'll have it all. And I know they're going to call on him to testify in front of Congress. He'll be happy to do so, and he'll lay them to waste. It was not only him, it was people like the OLC and Rosenstein. Let that sit a little bit. Rosenstein. Some people have called him a black hat throughout the entire thing. Some people have called him a white hat. Some people aren't sure one way or the other. I've never really thought that he was in the president's corner throughout all this. If he was, he wouldn't have called for a special counsel. So I never saw him as a white hat, certainly. So I believe very strongly that this determination that there was no obstruction on the president's part was definitely was found through sound reasoning, not through political purposes. I mean, remember, Rosenstein's leaving real soon. In fact, I'm sure the only reason he stayed was to help with this part of the report as it was coming in. If he knew that the report was going to take longer to drop, I'm sure Rosenstein wouldn't have hung on as long as he did. Now, the second part of that was our determination was made without regard to and is not based on the constitutional considerations that surround the indictment and criminal prosecution of a sitting president. And that's in this footnote here. See a sitting president's amenability to indictment and criminal prosecution, 24 OP OLC 222, 2000. That's the year it was produced. So, and what that refers to is I believe this is the distillation of two Department of Justice memos that were circulated back in the 70s and I believe early 80s that were in regards to whether or not you could indict a sitting president. And they said no, for a number of reasons, most of which being you would be able to completely throttle the president's ability to do his job to discharge his duties as the executive of the United States, as the first executive officer, by throwing legal challenges at him left and right. This doesn't mean you can't impeach a president based on anything that you would find him to be indictable on. That's what the House is for, to research high crimes and misdemeanors and come to a conclusion, and then refer to the Senate for an actual impeachment vote, whether or not they're going to remove the president from office or just impeach him and slap him on the wrist, like is what happened with Clinton. That had nothing to do with any of this. If it had, Mueller never would have released the words any future or secret indictments, because he could have had a secret indictment against Trump, a sealed indictment, I should say, that would have been held until Trump was out of office, and they could have nailed him then. But there is none of that, so that's not going to happen. There is nothing there. I'm sorry, I read that footnote wrong. It 24 OP OLC 222 2000 37040 through 41. Those are the page numbers. July 9, 1999. I got the year wrong. As I have previously stated, however, I am mindful of the public interest in this matter. For that reason, my goal and intent is to release as much of the special counsel's report as I can, consistent with applicable law, regulations, and departmental policies. Based on my discussions with the special counsel and my initial review, it is apparent that the report contains material that is or could be subject to Federal Rule of Criminal Procedure 6E, which imposes restrictions on the use and disclosure of information relating to, quote, matters occurring before a grand jury, end quote. Federal Rule of Criminal Procedures 6E 2B. Rule 6E generally limits disclosure of certain grand jury information in a criminal investigation and prosecution. Id. Disclosure of 6E material beyond the strict limits set forth in the rule is a crime in certain circumstances. See ergo 18 U.S.C. 4013. This restriction protects the integrity of grand jury proceedings and ensures that the unique and invaluable investigative powers of a grand jury are used strictly for their intended criminal justice function. So he's trying to head the Democrats off at the pass right here by saying, you're not going to get it all. You're not going to get every word because it would be legal. It's not because I don't want you to have it. It's not because the president doesn't want you to have it. And the president has absolutely zero say in this whatsoever, despite, I'm sure, certain people on the Hill yelling that he has or will. In fact, you can't do it. There is such a thing as sources and methods. So the Democrats had a point during the FISA application kerfuffle, and the Republicans have a point now. You can't release certain things for very strict and verifiable reasons. Given these restrictions, the schedule for processing the report depends in part on how quickly the department can identify the 6E material that by law cannot be made public. I have requested the assistance of the special counsel in identifying all 6E information contained in the report as quickly as possible. Separately, I must also identify any information that could impact other ongoing matters, including those that the special counsel has referred to other offices. As soon as that process is complete, I will be in a position to move forward expeditiously in determining what can be released in light of applicable law, regulations, and departmental policies. As I observed in my initial notification, the special counsel regulations provide that, quote, the Attorney General may determine that public release of, end quote, notifications to your respective committees, quote, would be in the public interest, end quote, 28 CFR 609C. I have so determined, and I will disclose this letter to the public after delivering it to you. Sincerely, William P. Barr, Attorney General. And that's the end of it. So there you have it. Basically, there was no collusion and there was no obstruction of justice. End of story. The conclusion was determined to very good account by Mueller. And let me repeat this part. 19 lawyers, who at least 13 were definitely in the bag Democrats. There may have been that we only knew about 13, and he had another 6 on staff that were not made public. I don't know if that's legal or not. I couldn't care, really. I could not care less. So 19 lawyers, 40 FBI agents, analysts, accountants, and other professional staff, 2,800 subpoenas, 500 search warrants, 230 orders for communication records, 50 pen registers, and 13 requests to foreign governments for evidence. And they interviewed 500 witnesses, approximately 500 witnesses. That is as thorough as you're going to get. And Mueller obviously left no stone unturned, as I had mentioned earlier, the indictments that he got. I mean, he indicted Russian nationals who are never going to see the inside of a U.S. courtroom. Some people think that those were not accurate indictments and that Mueller was trying to make himself look better by putting them out there, by showing how aggressive he was against the Russians, against people who really hadn't done anything. I can't say. I gave you my opinion on the emails and the Podesta hacks, or the Clinton and DNC hacks. As far as I'm concerned, they were not done by the Russians. But I'll be very interested to see what WikiLeaks has to say about this. I'm sure they'll be releasing something tomorrow, at least in a tweet regarding that. That will be interesting to see how that thread runs. So, yeah, no collusion, no coordination, even though, and I quote here, despite multiple offers from Russian-affiliated, see, not even just direct Russian, but Russian-affiliated individuals to assist the Trump campaign. So the Trump campaign ran clean. Remember, of all the Trump campaign officials or hangers-on who were indicted and convicted, or just indicted for that matter, none of those convictions, none of those indictments had anything to do with the campaign as far as Russian collusion or coordination went. None of them. They had to do with lies to the FBI about certain interactions with certain people. Papadopoulos says he's not so sure he lied as so much misspoke. The FBI said he lied, and they rung him up for it, and he served 12 days in county jail. Flynn, really, they went after him for a Hatch Act violation, or was it Logan Act? Logan Act violation, which no one's ever been prosecuted under before. And certainly you could make a case for going after the former Secretary of State and former presidential, I believe. Jesus, I can't remember. I'm sorry. The Secretary of State after Hillary. The guy who's been running around talking his mouth off, or shooting his mouth off to Iran about how President Trump is not long for the world, and they should just hang loose, wait it out, and then the world will be set right by them, and we'll get a new Iran deal put back on the table, and they'll be happy. Like we need to make fucking Iran happy. Can't think of his name right now. Damn it. So anyway, so there's the collusion, and then obstruction of justice, and there's nothing there. And by nothing, I mean, oh, hey, Jason. You know what? I'll tell you what. Is there anyone else in the chat who has a say on whether or not we just throw this back to the front and go through one more time with a little less editorializing to give Jason a full up on it? Anybody on that? I'm gonna vamp for about 30 seconds, and we'll see what we say. So, Jason, hang in there a little bit. No, you don't want to read? Okay. All right, so here's what's going on, Jason. First of all, Russian interference into the 2016 presidential election. There was Russian interference mainly by the GRU and the IRA, the Internet Research Agency. which I believe is part of the GRU. And that did happen. So according to this report, the indictments that Mueller threw against those Russian nationals, I think 25 Russian nationals, 26, those are valid. They also say that the Russians did, in fact, hack the emails. Okay, that's fine. We do have a little more, though, Jason. I'll tell you in a second. So there were, they say the Russians hacked the emails and that they distributed them through other entities, including WikiLeaks. We'll see what WikiLeaks says about that. So that's Russian interference. And then there was obstruction of justice. Let me just put this one part here. I think you'll love this. The special counsel did not find that the Trump campaign or anyone associated with it conspired or coordinated with the Russian government in these efforts, despite multiple offers from Russian-affiliated individuals to assist the Trump campaign. So as I read that, it's saying the Trump campaign had the opportunity provided to them by Russian-affiliated individuals to conspire or coordinate to hack the election against Hillary to prompt Trump up, and they told them no every time. So that idiot Schiff in the House who keeps screaming about how he has evidence of collusion, he can go suck it. And then the last one here, the second part, is the obstruction of justice charges. And so basically, Mueller looked at it. He listed what he thought could have been an argument for obstruction, and he listed what could have been an argument against obstruction in his main report. It's not listed here. This is just a summary. But he decided to leave the guilt or innocence determination up to the DOJ. And so William Barr was in the loop, and he worked with Rod Rosenstein and the Office of Legal Counsel and other people in the department, and they ultimately came down on the fact that the president, that the evidence developed during the special counsel's investigation is not sufficient to establish that the president committed an obstruction of justice offense. So there is no obstruction of justice. And it says, let me just set one more part here. In making this determination, we noted that the special counsel recognized that the evidence does not establish that the president was involved in an underlying crime related to Russian election interference. So there it is. Trump didn't do it. Now, there's more to regret, of course. Barr does make the perfectly and understandably legal conclusion that he can't release every word of this report to the general public or even to Congress. Because once it gets to Congress, it's going to be in everybody's hands. You know that. It's going to be leaked immediately by multiple committees. And I don't really have a problem with that. But what's going to happen is he has to restrict the disclosure of certain information regarding to matters occurring before a grand jury. So there were a number of grand jury depositions, if you will, or interrogations, which is more what a grand jury is like, and they can't release those just right off the bat. There is some question as to whether or not Congress can subpoena grand jury testimony. I don't remember where that falls, but you know that's going to happen. So there it is. Now, if you care to hang around, anyone else? This is a chapter from an upcoming completed book called Hate Incorporated. It's a web publication. The author's last name is Tabby, and it's on Substack.com. I'll have the link to it in the description. I think you might be interested in subscribing to author Tabby. He has some interesting stuff out there. I don't know if he could be considered left or right. He seems to be fairly left of center, but he's a reporter for Rolling Stone, so what would you expect? But I think you're going to find this part very interesting. This is a early release of one of his chapters in his book, Hate Incorporated, which is about the journalism industry as it stands today and how dividing it is to the American public. So you got to love the title. And you're welcome, Jason. You're very welcome. So let's see if y'all are interested in this. I promised a bonus, and here it is. Nobody wants to hear this, but news that Special Prosecutor Robert Mueller is headed home without issuing new charges is a death blow for the reputation of the American news media. And just to put a fine point on that, if you didn't hear from Friday, there will be no new indictments. There are no new indictments coming out. There are no sealed indictments waiting to come out. There will be no further prosecutions from the special counsel's office, period. As has long been rumored, the former FBI chief's independent probe will result in multiple indictments and convictions, but no presidency-wrecking conspiracy charges or anything that would meet the layman's definition of collusion with Russia. With the caveat that even this news might somehow turn out to be botched, the key detail in the many stories about the end of the Mueller investigation was best expressed by the New York Times. Quote, a senior Justice Department official said that Mr. Mueller would not recommend new indictments. Well, thank you. The Times tried to soften the emotional blow for the millions of Americans trained in these years to place hopes for the overturn of the Trump presidency in Mueller. Nobody even pretended it was supposed to be a fact-finding mission, instead an act of faith. The special prosecutor literally became a religious figure during the last few years, with votive candles sold in his image and Saturday Night Live cast members singing All I Want for Christmas Is You to him, featuring the rhyming line, Mueller, please come through, because the only option is a coup. The Times story today tried to preserve Santa Mueller's reputation. I have not read this ahead of time. Santa Mueller's reputation, noting Trump's Attorney General William Barr's reaction was an endorsement of the fineness of Mueller's work. Quote, in an apparent endorsement of an investigation that Mr. Trump has relentlessly attacked as a witch hunt, prove it wasn't, Mr. Barr said Justice Department officials never had to intervene to keep Mr. Mueller from taking an inappropriate or unwarranted step. Mueller, in other words, never stepped out of the bounds of his job description, but could the same be said for the news media? For those anxious to keep the dream alive, the Times published its usual graphic of Trump-Russia contacts, inviting the reader to keep making connections. But in a separate piece by Peter Baker, the paper noted the Mueller news had dire consequences for the press. Quote, it will be a reckoning for President Trump, to be sure, but also for Robert S. Mueller III, the special counsel, for Congress, for Democrats, for Republicans, for the news media, and yes, for the system as a whole. And let me just make a note there, if you've had any chance to watch MSNBC since the Mueller report first dropped, Friday night with Rachel Maddow, and then yesterday morning with Joy Reid, you'll know that insanity reigns supreme at MSNBC. They are basically saying, well, maybe Mueller's right, maybe Mueller's wrong. We'll see. We haven't seen everything yet. We can't trust him. Meanwhile, at CNN, they're basically trying to cover their own butts by saying, well, we knew Mueller would be right. Jeffrey Toobin, their legal analyst, who was horrible at his job, he came up and said, this is great news for Trump. It's over. And I'm like, how could it be over? You people have been beating this drum for 2 years that it was going to come through and Trump was going to be kicked out of office. And instead they found nothing. To continue. This is a damning page 1 admission by the Times. Despite the connect-the-dots to history's judgment on top of the hard enough job of just being true. Worse, in a brutal irony everyone should have seen coming, the press has now handed Trump the mother of campaign issues headed into 2020. Uncle Bobbity, sorry I missed you, sir. But are there any shadows of possible saran-wrapped indictments? Can we take this to the people's court? Cue the screams about the SDNY Mueller investigation. Tax voice bought a second term for Trump. Yeah, I would say that Trump's going to be able to ride this all the way to the bank, Uncle Bobbity. And they are totally throwing their hat in the ring for the SDNY now. They've barely talked about it. But now, suddenly, it is the saving grace. And here's what's going to happen, in my opinion. Campaign finance violation, not there. It's already been proven by Cohen's testimony that they would have made those payments regardless if it had been a presidential campaign or not. Thereby, it's not campaign finance. Thereby, it's not a crime. So Cohen, thanks to Lonnie Davis, pleaded guilty to a crime that wasn't a crime. The hush payments themselves, again, came out of Trump's pocket. They couldn't convict Edwards on using his own money to pay a staffer who was pregnant by him and who he had asked, I believe, to seek an abortion. They couldn't get a full jury to ring up Edwards. So how are they going to get Trump? So that's not going to happen. Because remember, the feds don't bring cases, in their opinion, unless they have a, beyond a reasonable doubt, but a high probability of conviction before they will bring a case. Let's see, so there's that. Then there's the inaugural ball. No way that's anything if it happened. And let's just say it did. Let's say they took too much money from foreign individuals. That's a fine. Same with campaign finance. That's a fine. So that's not going to do anything. Trump Foundation. Trump was in charge of it, but what exactly did they do wrong? They moved some money that they shouldn't have. As far as I've read, that's all that happened. So again, it wasn't a fraud. It wasn't like they were the SPLC. So there's a financial hit, a fine. There's basically nothing in the SDNY that I've seen that would knock Trump out of office. And remember, it all happened either before or just after he turned president with the inaugural ball. Everything else was before. So how can they get him on a high crime and misdemeanor while in office for something that didn't make any difference? That's how I see it. Thank you for bringing that up, Uncle Bobbity. You're very well put. I do like the saran-wrapped indictments. That's very nice. That paints a picture. I myself use Ziploc bags, though, just so you know. I prefer them. Nothing Trump is accused of from now by the press will be believed by huge chunks of the population, a group that perhaps, thanks to this story, is now larger than his original base. As Baker notes, a full 50.3% of respondents in a poll conducted this month said they agree with Trump the Mueller probe is a witch hunt. Stories have been coming out for some time now hinting Mueller's final report might leave audiences disappointed, as if a president not being a foreign spy could somehow be bad news. Yes, absolutely. I'm glad he made that point. For these journalists to be jumping up and down, yelling that basically they want Trump to fail. And it's happened every time you turn around. It doesn't matter if it was the tax cut, which they all richly lied about, to the way they totally tried to sabotage, if not just sandbag, the North Korea talks. And then the way Congress has been acting in that same regard, especially since the Democrats took over the House. It's pathetic to think that you want your country to fall flat on its face because you lost the election. That has been the part that has bothered me the most through this whole thing. It's not the accusations, really. They're silly. It's the rooting for America to be rent into shreds. That I find that treasonous. Pardon me for using the word if you think that should be held in the pocket unless it's absolutely necessary, but I find that kind of work treasonous. Openly using such language has all along been an indictment. Imagine how tone deaf you'd have to be Imagine how tone deaf you'd have to be to not realize it makes you look bad when news does not match audience expectations you raised. To be unaware of this is mind-boggling, the journalistic equivalent of walking outside without pants. There will be people protesting. The Mueller report doesn't prove anything. What about the 37 indictments, the convictions, the Trump Tower revelations, the lies, the meeting with Don Jr., the financial matters? There's an ongoing grand jury investigation and possible sealed indictments, and the House will still investigate. And stop. Just stop. Any journalist who goes there is making it worse. Now, that's not necessarily true. I mean, there are things happening that you should look at. You shouldn't be rooting for the worst case scenario, but you should be reporting the facts. And I think that's actually where he's going with that sentence about stop, just stop. It's the breathless, credulous nature of their reporting. And of course, the 37 indictments, 26 for those were Russians. The conviction, and an indictment is not a conviction, by the way. The convictions, none of them had to do with Trump-Russia collusion. None of them. None of them had to do with the campaign conspiring with Russia. They were all process crimes, basically lying to the FBI. And Manafort, of course, 10-year-old tax charges. He did a bad thing. He did several bad things. He should go to jail for them, in my opinion. Is 7 years enough? I'd say so. I'd say it might be more than enough given his age. And there should be a hefty fine, of course. But there also should be some looks at Tony Podesta, seeing as how he was running the place that Manafort was working at. And if they're going to try to ring up Trump for the Trump Foundation misusing funds, I think Tony Podesta should be really, really looking over his shoulder right now. And there's a lot to say that it will be that case, that a lot of people from the Dem side will be taken to task, will be indicted, because let's face it now, the gloves are off. There's no reason for the DOJ to hold back. The Mueller probe, is over. There's nothing more to wait on. Once this report gets delivered to Congress and then to the public is when I predict the hammer is going to come down on the Dems. I could be wrong. Mark it. Throw it in my face if I am. But that's how I see it. I'm sorry, I kicked the camera. My mistake. For years, every pundit and Democratic poll in Washington hyped every new Russia headline like the Watergate break-in. Literally. Now even Nancy Pelosi has said impeachment is out unless, quote, something so compelling and overwhelmingly and bipartisan, unquote, against Trump is uncovered, it would be worth their political trouble to prosecute. Yeah, that's not what your new girls have been saying, Nancy. You've got to pay attention to the fringe left in the party now, or you're going to get kicked out of your chair position. The biggest thing this affair has uncovered so far is Donald Trump paying off a porn star. That's a hell of a long way from what this business was supposedly about at the beginning, and shame on any reporter who tries to pretend this isn't so. And let's just state right here, the Mueller investigation did not uncover Stormy Daniels. Stormy Daniels uncovered Stormy Daniels. And now she's on the hook for hundreds of thousands of dollars because she broke the NDA and for legal fees. And she's also fired Avenatti. Couldn't have happened to a nicer weasel. Weasels. I don't fault anyone for having an affair, especially for over 100 grand, but to turn your back on a legal contract just because you want more publicity, you should get every bad event handed to you that is lawful and legal. And moral, for that matter. I know I'm a bit of a prude. The story hyped from the start was espionage, a secret relationship between the Trump campaign and Russian spooks who'd helped him win the election. The betrayal narrative was not reported as a metaphor. It was not, Trump likes the Russians so much he might as well be a spy for them. It was literal spying, treason, and election fixing. Crimes so severe, former NSA employee John Schindler told reporters Trump will die in jail. In the early months of this scandal, the New York Times said Trump's campaign had repeated contacts, quote-unquote, with Russian intelligence. The Wall Street Journal told us our spy agencies were withholding intelligence from the new president out of fear he was compromised. News leaked out our spy chiefs had even told other countries like Israel not to share their intel with us because the Russians might have, quote, leverages of pressure, unquote, on Trump. CNN told us Trump officials had been in constant contact with Russians known to U.S. intelligence. And the former director of the CIA, who I can't wait to see indicted, who had helped kickstart the investigation that led to Mueller's probe, said the president was guilty of high crimes and misdemeanors, committing acts nothing short of treasonous. You snake. Hillary Clinton insisted Russians could not have known how to weaponize political ads unless they'd been guided by Americans. I love that. I love that. That the Russians are such babes in the woods when it comes to trying to destabilize other governments that they couldn't have figured out how to take emails that they may or may not have received. I'm still on the fence about that. But how they couldn't have figured out how to use them to the best advantage, to their best advantage, without someone from the U.S. guiding them along. That just goes to show how much of a bullet we dodged by not electing that Harridan to the U.S. presidential seat. Asked if she meant Trump, she said, "It's pretty hard not to." Harry Reid, there's another piece of shit, similarly said he had no doubt that the Trump campaign was in on the deal to help Russians with the leak. None of this has been walked back. To be clear, if Trump was being blackmailed by Russian agencies like the FSB or the GRU, if he had any kind of relationship with Russian intelligence, that would soar over the overwhelming and bipartisan standard, and Nancy Pelosi would be damning torpedoes for impeachment right now. Damning torpedoes. Yeah, I suppose I could go either way. I prefer arming torpedoes, but I can see how he would be saying that she'd be of the mind of, you know what, never mind the consequences, we're going for it. But if it's such overwhelming and bipartisan concrete evidence, then why would she be worried about any torpedoes? Yeah, I'm going to have to take a quibble with Mr. Tabby on that use of the English language. There was never real gray area here. Either Trump is a compromised foreign agent or he isn't. If he isn't, news outlets once again followed a massive disinformation campaign. Only this error is many orders of magnitude more stupid than any in the recent past, WMD included. Honest reporters like ABC's Terry Moran understand. Mueller coming back empty-handed on collusion means, quote, a reckoning for the media, unquote. Of course, there won't be much of a reckoning, there never is, but there should be. We broke every written and unwritten rule in pursuit of the story, starting with the prohibition on things we can't confirm. There you go. So that is Mr. Tabby, whose first name keeps escaping me. His online book is called Hate Incorporated. he has published several other things on Substack. So I would look into it if I were you. I will again put the link in the description for his main page, and he does work on subscribers if you like. I believe the subscription is $5 a month, and you get updated chapters to his books, and you also get a free copy of the first book he published on Tabby, as well as access to his other essays and things like that. But that is today, March 24th, folks. We have an official standing that Trump did not collude or conspire, or did any of his campaign collude or conspire with the Russians or Russian-affiliated individuals in assisting the Trump campaign. Unlike Hillary and the Ukrainians, if you haven't seen that story yet, I suggest you look into it, because the Ukrainian parliament has opened an investigation, a criminal investigation, into one of their higher-ranking officials who is caught on tape saying that he wants to help Hillary Clinton win the election, and he was planning on doing it by, and he did ultimately, release documents that were release documents that harmed Paul Manafort. I believe they're financial disclosures. That really happened. Now, if you add that to what some, in fact many, think on this side of the aisle is Hillary's complete disregard for campaign finance rules and complete disregard for collusion by investigating Trump through Richard Steele, using Perkins Coie as a cutout for her hiring Fusion GPS, there's a fine. A fine. Again, it's a campaign finance matter. I don't think she's going to go to jail for it, but it's a fine. But really, folks, really, let's look at this. Hillary's email. I think you may have seen earlier this week that the FBI uncovered another 72,000 emails. I shouldn't say another. They uncovered 72,000 emails, some of which turned out to have not been seen before and were, in fact, confidential emails on her server. They've proven that. Now remember, she was never found not guilty. She never had a trial. She was never indicted. So there is no reason that Barr can't go after her. None whatsoever. I think first, though, we're going to have to wait to the IG report, Horowitz report, on what's been going on in the FBI. That's going to have to happen. There are still some chickens that need to come home to roost before the full-scale assault on the illegalities committed by the Democrats during the campaign and before will come to light. But it's going to happen, in my opinion. It's going to happen. H.A. Goodman, he's a prophet. But there it is. And also, as I believe I may not have said just recently, obstruction of justice. Mueller decided that he was not going to call if Trump's actions regarding that were illegal or legal, that he just compiled the information for and against, and he gave that information to the DOJ. And Barr and Rosenstein and the Office of Legal Counsel, or Special Counsel, Office of Legal Counsel in the DOJ, along with Rosenstein and Barr, concluded that there was no obstruction. They came right down on the side of the law. So there's that. It's done. You've got the SDNY, nothing's going to happen. You've got the Eastern District of Virginia, nothing's going to happen. I believe that's the emoluments case, which is a laugh. Trump's clear, folks. And if I may say, I predicted this fully and wholly back last year when the Mueller indictments against the Russians came out. I believe that was on Hat's Gorilla News channel. I'll see if I can find the link. And channel's so dark, I don't know if I can even pull anything out from it anymore. But I predicted, excuse me, I did not predict. I said from the rooftop, from the microphone top, that Trump was cleared because Mueller had indicted 25, 26 Russians on the election interference, but no one from the Trump campaign. If Mueller could go to all that length to find and get the names of these these Russian, that's how old I am, these Russian actors out of the the Internet Research Agency, if he could get their names and ring them up on charges, but no Trump people, well, that was it right there. That was it right there, and I knew it, and it was borne out to be true. So I'll look for that link, and I will close it here. My former executive producer, I'm going to have to find a new title for her, says there's nothing wholesome about hat. I appreciate that little kibitz from the gallery. I'm going to leave you all with the rest of your day, and you can rest assured that once the full report is delivered, I will read the whole Megillah. I don't care how many pages it is. It may take me several days, but I will read it in its entirety. I may even get 10 or 20 people to look at it. So be well, everyone. And remember, I'm Hat. This is Hat. This is Hat in All Hat No Cattle, AHNC. And I thank you for your day. Jason, thanks for stopping by. Uncle Bobbity, as always, of course. And Picasso knows. We'll talk later. Bye, everybody.